Welcome to This Explainer. Okay, I am so thrilled you're here because today we are absolutely decoding the psychology of unbreakable consistency. Look, if you've ever felt completely frustrated by your inability to stick to a routine, I've got some great news for you. We are going to stop relying on that fundamentally flawed concept called willpower. Instead, we're building a totally new psychological architecture from the ground up using the exact mechanics of how your brain actually works. Let's start by totally reframing what failure actually means. We hear all the time that most people don't fail because they're untalented. They fail because they just stop too soon. Whether that's quitting the gym after 2 short weeks, abandoning a new language, or uploading, say, 3 videos to a new YouTube channel and then completely vanishing. The core issue at play here, it's almost never your raw capability. Actually, it's pretty much just your timeline. The real difference between average people and highly successful people usually just boils down to who stayed in the game longer. But this brings up a massive question, right? Why is staying consistent so incredibly difficult for our brains? We naturally carry around a tremendous amount of guilt regarding our failed goals, like that expensive blender currently gathering dust on the kitchen counter. We blame our character, or we think, oh, I'm just naturally lazy. But to truly fix the problem, we have to pause and genuinely ask ourselves what is happening on a neurological level that creates so much resistance to doing the things we actually want to do. So here is our roadmap for today. We're going to cover why we quit too soon, the motivation and dopamine trap, systems over willpower, the identity shift, starting small and imperfect, and finally, the power of slow progress. All right, let's dive into section 1, why we quit too soon. It's fascinating how our hardwired desires just completely clash with our actual goals. Honestly, your brain is simply not naturally designed to care about your long-term goals. It is desperately seeking immediate comfort and instant dopamine. That is precisely why scrolling on your phone feels so much easier than studying, and why ordering fast food almost always wins out over cooking a healthy meal. Consistency, by its very nature, demands delayed rewards. And this drops us right into what is highly vulnerable territory, the invisible progress stage. This is that frustrating gap where you're putting in the work, but there is absolutely no visible proof yet. Imagine someone learning to play the guitar. They're going to sound pretty terrible for weeks before you notice any real improvement. Because the results are delayed and practically invisible, the human brain automatically interprets all that hard effort as completely pointless. Moving right along to section 2, the motivation and dopamine trap. When you actually stop and look at how many variables affect us every single day, sleep, stress, shifting hormones, fleeting emotions, you see exactly why the classic "I'll start Monday when I feel ready" trap is a highly, highly unstable system. Motivation is literally the worst possible fuel for consistency because it's just too volatile. It fluctuates wildly day by day. If your success depends on constantly feeling motivated, well, your progress is always going to be unstable. And compounding all of this is our modern dopamine problem. We really have to recognize that our attention is constantly under attack. When your brain gets accustomed to receiving incredibly high levels of instant stimulation from endless scrolling and rapid-fire notifications, ordinary but deeply productive tasks start to feel almost physically painful. Studying feels agonizingly slow. Reading feels boring. Your dopamine system just adapts to that overstimulation, making the delayed rewards of consistency feel deeply underwhelming. Okay, on to section 3, systems over willpower. There is just a stark difference in how people operate here. Average people waste massive amounts of mental energy debating if they should do a task. You know the feeling. Should I go to the gym now? Maybe later. I'm kind of tired. That mental negotiation drains you. Consistent people, on the other hand, simply stop negotiating with themselves. They make it an automatic, non-negotiable scheduled system. The task completely transforms from an emotional choice into just a standard, boring part of the routine. And the absolute best way to automate those choices is through environment design. The smartest form of discipline is simply reducing the need for discipline entirely. You do this by ruthlessly removing friction from good habits and heavily adding friction to bad ones. If you want to work out, lay your gym clothes out the night before. If you want to eat healthier, simply do not allow junk food into your house. Your environment shapes your behavior far more than your willpower ever could. Which brings us to section 4, the identity shift. Changing your vocabulary is a massive psychological tool. If you say, "I'm trying to work out," you're actually signaling to your brain that this is outside your normal behavior. It's an exception. But if you adopt a new identity and say, "I am someone who trains consistently," you fundamentally reprogram yourself. Human beings naturally behave according to the identity they believe they hold. Someone who truly identifies as disciplined feels deeply uncomfortable wasting an entire day. On the flip side, you've got to be incredibly careful to stop unknowingly reinforcing negative labels. If you walk around constantly telling yourself, oh, I'm lazy, or I never finish things, your brain actively trains itself to accept those labels as the dangerous, unavoidable truth. You have to let your new, disciplined actions start feeling like the normal, default behavior for your newly chosen identity. All right, section 5, start small and imperfect. One of the biggest reasons we fail is, frankly, we start way too aggressively. Massive productivity routines and extreme diets, they inevitably lead to burnout because the absolute hardest part of any task is usually just the act of starting. Adopting small, seemingly unimpressive micro actions is infinitely superior. 5 minutes of reading or 10 quick push-ups significantly reduces your psychological resistance. Once you start, momentum just naturally takes over, and continuing becomes a breeze. Because the reality is, consistency is fundamentally about repetition, not intensity. An all-or-nothing perfectionist mindset is incredibly destructive. Missing one workout shouldn't mean the whole week collapses. Instead, learn the art of scaling down. If you planned a 1-hour workout but you are totally exhausted, do a 15-minute workout. A short, imperfect session protects and keeps the habit alive, which is so much easier than having to restart a dead habit completely from scratch. Finally, Section 6, the power of slow progress. Improving just 1% daily? I know, it feels agonizingly slow. We live in this modern culture that constantly pushes for fast results, fast success, overnight transformations. But meaningful progress is slow. Mathematically, if you just get 1% better every day for a year, you end up 37 times better by the time you're done. Now, sure, it doesn't feel like much on day 3 or day 4, but if you have the patience to sustain it, it eventually compounds to make you completely unrecognizable in the future. Consistency works exactly like investing. The early stages look completely, totally unimpressive. But behind the scenes, that boring, quiet repetition is building massive, undeniable results. The people who look naturally gifted to the outside world, yeah, they are usually just the ones who survived those boring days and allowed the compounding stage to finally take over. But how do you actually survive those unimpressive early days? Well, to survive that invisible progress stage, when physical changes aren't immediate, highly consistent people rely heavily on visual tracking. Whether it's a calendar, a checklist, an app on your phone, physically checking off that box serves as undeniable psychological evidence that you are indeed moving forward, even if you can't see the final results in the mirror just yet. And doing this builds something truly incredible. A lot of people think you need confidence to start, but confidence doesn't come first. Confidence comes from evidence. When you build resilient routines that actually survive your bad days, your brain begins to genuinely trust you. You shift your self-image from someone who frequently quits to someone who is endlessly, undeniably reliable. Your standards change, your decisions change, and honestly, your self-respect completely transforms. So, as we wrap up this explainer, I want to leave you with one final provocative question. What would your life look like exactly 1 year from now if you finally became consistent? Don't wait for the perfect Monday. Don't wait for the perfect mood. Start smaller than your ego wants, protect your focus, and never fully stop. Think deeply about this, challenge your actions for tomorrow, and just focus on becoming the type of person who keeps showing up.